Hi, I'm Naomi Olutayo, and I partner with women to fully actualize their brands to mirror the image that God originally gave them with the power of brand strategy. And I'm very excited to make this video today because it's not my favorite topic, but it's one of those topics I just love talking about it because it's so interesting. And if you read the title, that is attachment styles and how they correlate and relate to and impact your business and your brand. If you are new to psychology speak and you've never heard of attachment styles, I got a definition from the Cleveland Clinic, and their definition says attachment styles are the way our primary caregivers interacted with us as infants and how those interactions affect our relationships in adulthood. And there are 4 attachment styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. Now there are variations within them, like anxious avoidant, or I don't know. There's some arrangements, but I would definitely recommend to look more into it. But the focus of today really is to talk about how it shows up in your business. Okay, let me tell you a story. Let me put my laptop down. So, I have been an entrepreneur and business owner since I was a baby, basically. I walked out the womb wanting to open up a business. My very first business was Gifties. I opened that up when I was 6 or 7 years old, where I sold different gifts. I was a gift shop, basically. I tried to be a gift shop where I would sell gifts to people to give to other loved ones, family members, etc. So I've had a long time of starting, having success and failure. And one thing that I've always noticed in my businesses was just my lack of commitment. It was very hard for me to really carry out the full length of my strategy, not even just the strategy, but just committing to my business in itself. That was always something that was very difficult for me. And it wasn't until recently that I was finally able to sit down after several failed friendships and relationships within 1 year and just kind of being left alone to myself. I had to look at who I am and where I've been and where I'm going, because something just wasn't clicking with me. I just found that I couldn't maintain relationships in my life past a period of time, or if they were a relationship that lasted a long time, it was hurting me. So I sat down and I was just trying to figure out like what's going on. And at that point, I had already been privy to attachment styles for years. I just didn't have the introspection at the time on my own to really dig deep enough to find a solution. So I remember I took a test just to confirm what I assumed about myself. I assumed that I was an avoidant or an anxious avoidant. So I took the test and I was just straight avoidant. The biggest piece of the pie chart that I took, and if I can find the quiz, I'll definitely link it down below so you can take it too. But the biggest piece of my pie was avoidance. That was my attachment style. And that didn't surprise me. It surprised me how much of the pie that it took. When I say pie, it was a pie chart, but how much of the graph that it was avoidant, but it made sense and it was in line with what I was doing. And at that point, I was just so tired of having failure after failure after failure. And these relationships were affecting me and my money and my life and my progress too. Like I said, I started and stopped and had successes and failures all my life, but I never really got as far as I'd desired to. So after I really sat with the fact that I'm an avoidant, and I started to look back at things that God was telling me and things that I and myself noticed about myself, I realized that my avoidant tendencies was manifesting in my businesses. It was manifesting in my work. So the biggest fear, I should say, that I had, one of my biggest fears was enmeshment. I never liked getting too close with somebody because I did not want to be enmeshed with them. And at the same time as fearing their enmeshment and moving myself away, I would also crave their validation, their acceptance, and their approval. So it was like this push and pull effect. If you met me, you may not have noticed it. I definitely came off more anxious, but at my core, I realized that's really what it was doing. I was often doing the push and pull effect. It's just because there was so much other unhealed parts of me that, I just couldn't really see it in myself. So I remember after my last relationship, I was just sitting there and wondering, like, what am I doing wrong? Because something's not making sense. Like, why is it that it always comes to this point and it ends so badly? And I realized it. I realized that it was my fear of enmeshment, of getting too close to somebody, of losing my sense of self. I feared my loss of my sense of self, which didn't make sense because my sense of self was so burdened already and was kind of hazy. So I feared the loss of something I didn't even think I had. And I also craved something that I should have been giving myself, which was validation, affirmation, love, care, attention, all those things. And when I looked at my business, I was thinking about how in the beginning, let's say for my current business, We Are Boundless Studios, that's my, I guess you can call it agency name, or my consulting firm name, my strategy agency. I remember when God first gave me the name, the color scheme, and he started to show me the fullness of the vision. And I was like, cool, okay. But at that time, there was so much going on, and I needed financial provision so much. So all my actions weren't in line with the vision that God gave me. It really was just me trying to secure my security and provision. And it worked a little bit for a time, but it wasn't sustainable. It burnt me out, and it didn't really get me anywhere. So of course, I remember one day God came to me and he said, Naomi, you're not committed to this. And I was like, why? I am committed. And he said, no, you're not committed because you're afraid. And he started to show me, like, if you were committed, you would not abandon the vision that I gave you. You would not shrivel back in fear for the bigness of what it was. And most importantly, you would not fear giving your 101% into this thing, because you would have confidence of it working, and you would know that there's a possibility that you won't have to lose yourself in this thing. Growing up, I've only ever seen people get lost in their pursuits of happiness, of stability, of money, relationships. I was not somebody who was around I was not around whole people. So for growing up, I just couldn't imagine having a business where it demanded a lot of me, but it didn't take everything from me either. And that's where my commitment was severed. So God gave me a strategy. He said, Naomi, if you want to prove your commitment to something, there are two things that you can do. You can make an investment, a sacrificial investment, or you can take a risk. The sacrificial investment is energetic proof, and sends out an energetic code to the universe that this is something that I believe in and it's happening. And the risk really should be the inspired action behind that movement that breeds the results for it. And although God gave me that understanding, and I tried my best to do so, it didn't really click. And that was because that fear of enmeshment never really went away. How can you fully commit to something, spiritually, emotionally, and energetically, and eventually by way of your actions, if you fear that this business is going to take everything from you, and that there's going to be nothing left of you? How can you fully realize and actualize the fullness of your brand if you are looking at that vision and saying, I can't have that unless I lose myself, and I'm not willing to lose myself? That was my problem. Remember, I said that my attachment style was avoidant. One of the largest fears of an avoidant is enmeshment. For anxious, I believe it's rejection. So I believed I was kind of teetering on both, but I was mostly avoidant. So all my biggest fears really hindered me from, one, seeing the vision that God gave me, and two, executing it. And of course, what happens when you exist below your standard of excellence? The standard of excellence being your most realized and actualized self. Your most realized and actualized self. It crumbles. It falls apart. And for me, it crashed and burned. I went through the hardest, maybe not hardest, I went through some pretty hard years, but I went through some pretty crazy years after that. And I remember it got to the point where I just completely put down my business. I was like, God, you gave me this vision and it didn't happen. How many times have you been in relationships where you give it your all, and at the end of it, you guys are left hurt, battered, and confused? You're bitter, you're angry. How many times has that happened? After feeling like this was the person you're going to spend your life with, after thinking that this was your best friend, after believing that, you just found your twin flame, your kingdom spouse, or whatever you want to call it, just for the crash and burn. The answer lies in your attachment styles and your unwillingness or willingness to align yourself with your most secured self. Attachment styles show up in business in the same way it shows up in your relationships. It's the same relationship, if unchecked, that you had with your parents growing up. My avoidant attachment style came from my childhood and how my parents parented me or didn't parent me. My parents weren't emotionally active in my life at all. I'll just say that. And I was the black sheep of the family. If you know, you know. So I learned that it was easier to play it safe, to shrink yourself and be agreeable, and that's where my people pleasing came from. And that's how I maintained my safety. And so when I built my business, and God told me, I want you to charge this much. I want you to have this color scheme. I want you to become a financial institution and build it to be this specific thing. And I want you to offer coaching in these countries and everything, whatever he told me. And I'm looking at myself, one, I can't commit to that because I'm scared of that running my life. I lacked a self of self. My self-concept was so battered and kind of depleted. And I didn't have the self-esteem to even trust myself to bring about those visions. And on top of that, I was so scared that God was going to take my business away, because all I felt like I experienced with that was him taking things away from me. When you're in a relationship, are you afraid that you're going to lose your partner all the time? That's an attachment style. And that was the same with me in my relationships and friendships. I was always trying to be agreeable and people please because I didn't want to lose them. I didn't feel like I could maintain the greatness of what I thought that person was. Really, in my business, I did not believe that I could maintain the fullness of the vision that God showed me. One, because it was unconventional. It seemed crazy to me, and it didn't make sense when I asked people. It made sense when I had the vision, but when I sought counsel or asked people, people didn't understand it. People thought I was kind of stupid, honestly. Especially with how young I am. People just didn't take me seriously. So I remember one time when I first got the vision for the visual identity for my brand. It didn't make sense. Like, if you look at my website and you look at the color scheme I'm using on YouTube and my Instagram, or wherever you found me on, you'll see that it's like a muted grayish, not turquoise, but blue, and like a lighter blue, that kind of grayish, and then it's like periwinkle but on the gray tone but more blue toned. Then you add like the sand toned neutral, and then I have this dark brown. And it didn't make sense in my mind. As a strategist, I was trained to do a certain type of research and competitive analysis before I even picked my colors. So when God just downloaded those colors to me, and he was like, these are the colors that you're going to be building your business off of, it just didn't make sense. And so I took it to my first designer, and she completely butchered it. She also didn't agree with my color palette. She didn't like it. And she thought because I'm not a graphic designer, she should just kind of steer me in the right direction. So she did, And it was the complete opposite of what God told me. And I told her, you can please have freedom to do what you want. Just make sure it follows this color scheme and keep these other factors in mind. And that's it. She completely flipped it and changed it. And she really tried to get me to shift away from those color schemes. Ended up firing her, and I never got my brand identity. After that, I tried doing it myself. And I ended up with this light pink color scheme that made no sense for anything. And I remember I went to a couple other designers, and they were all like, some of them specifically, they told me, no one's going to be able to design this. This is not going to make any sense. Good luck finding a designer who's willing to put up with you. You're a terrible client. And I was just like, I mean, I'm not a designer. I'm trying to express my vision to you. Isn't it your job to kind of make sense of it? But either way, I didn't get a designer after that. It took me almost 3 years to where I was able to sit down and build out myself, not being a designer, to build out the fullness of that vision. And it's not even complete yet, because I know I'm going to need a designer eventually and a graphic designer. I'm still searching and looking, but just being able to comprehend the vision I had way back when, and being able to put it on paper and pick fonts and photos that kind of are starting to piece together what I'm seeing, what God showed me. I could have never imagined that. But also, things just went so much smoother once I finally just said, you know what, God, you gave me this for a reason. Let me just follow this. So the point of what I'm saying is, it takes a lot of self-trust to do what you saw, especially when no one can see it. It takes a securely attached person to look at their business and look at their vision and fill the gap between the two. You know what I mean? You know, I gave my story, and hopefully you're able to find yourself depending on your attachment style. But I also want you to recognize that a securely attached person does not see their business and it as them. They don't enmesh themselves with their business like I did. I saw my business as, it meant more than just a vehicle of avenue through which money flows. My brand meant more than just the avenue through which I can magnetically attract people to me and house them in a container. I attach my self-worth, my self-concept, my character, everything in this business, and that's unhealthy. That's often signs of attachment styles that aren't healthy. A securely attached person fully understands that their business is an extension of them. It came from them. It existed in their mind as an idea, as an inspired action, as a vision. And then through the process of execution, they brought it to life through their products, through their brand identity, their visual identity, through their processes and their systems, their employees, everything. And they see that as separate from them, but it came from them. They see it as a mirror of their inner world. They see it as a reflection of themselves, but it's not them. Their business can give them hints of what's going on inside, but it's not them. I want to read to you a thread that I wrote. Healing your attachment styles is so important when it comes to business. Securely attached people do not find their entire identity and worth in their business. They know that they are a whole person with or without it, and they recognize that their business came from them, but it's not them. It's just a materialized version of the desires, dreams, visions, goals, and purpose. The relationship you have with your business often mirrors the relationship you have with your parents, and how your parents raised you produces your attachment style. If you know your attachment, you can understand why you're in your business. I used to be an avoidant attached person. It showed up in all of my relationships and of course my business. I hid behind my business by never showing my true authentic self. I could never fully commit to my vision out of fear of failing. I was resistant to outside help and claimed it was too expensive and couldn't trust my own process, so I jumped around with strategies a lot. And when my business demanded more of me, I would ignore my responsibilities and not pay attention to it. Healing my attachment style in my relationships really challenged me to show up in business better. People usually talk about attachment styles pertaining to romantic relationships, but at its core, it reveals our self-concept, esteem, and trust. It takes a tremendous amount of self-trust to say you're going to build a successful business and actually carry it through. Same as relationships. I believe everyone is you pushed out. meaning the people you're around is a reflection of your belief system, self-concept, and values. Your business came from you and now exists as an entity outside of you. It can't exist without you, unless someone else holds your vision for you. So when your business shows up in any way, it's a reflection of your internal world. For example, when I started my business, I had a deep fear of enmeshment. I didn't want to get close to anyone out of fear of losing myself. So when it came to my business, I wasn't consistent. I had inconsistent sales, which worked for me because my business requiring more of me scared me. This showed my lack of commitment. Your business is you pushed out. It's a projection of your internal world. Whenever my business is thriving, I take a look at my relationships. Whenever I'm not thriving in general, I look at my relationships. They always reveal how I feel about my business and how I'm showing up for it. Unhealthy attachment styles enmesh themselves with their businesses. They use them as a source of validation, affirmation, and love. It's so important to have a strong sense of self as a business owner, because the moment your sense of self is derived from your business, your health, and your business itself will start to decline. I encourage you to make it a priority for the wellness aspect or the wellness strategy of you, the founder, the owner, the lead strategist or creative director, the lead visionary of your brand and business, to start healing the parts of you that oftentimes are projected into your business. What's the relationship with your employees? How do you treat them? How do they feel about you? Do you know how they feel about you? What's the relationship that you have with your customers? Do you look down on them? Do you see them as cash cows that just buy your product without you even having to serve them in any way? What is your perception of your brand? And how are your customers actually perceiving them? Who are you? How's your marriage? How's your relationship? How's your relationship with your kids? Those things are all important. And I'm telling you, they are all a reflection of attachment styles. If you're vying for approval or attention, you may be anxious. That's something that's going to show up in your messaging. Do you feel like you're always trying to convince people to buy? Is it always so hard to make content strategies and marketing material because you don't even know who you're talking to? Do you even have a desire to get to know them? What are you ignoring in your business? Is your business profitable? Is there a healthy cash flow? Are you paying your taxes on time? What are you ignoring? Those are all questions that you should be asking to give truth to what your attachment style is. And again, I would love for you to take that quiz that I'll link down below. It's not my quiz, I found it on Google, so I'll just have to link it, and I don't remember the name of it, but definitely take it. And once you figure out what your attachment style is, start researching how attachment styles show up and laterally think. Think about, lateral thinking is, I like to call it linear thinking. Not in the sense like you're thinking from a straight line, but you're thinking of things, your first subject of thought, and finding a subject of thought that is linear to it. It's similar and can exist next to it, complementary, I would say. So think, what's linear? Colors, think of colors. Colors that complement each other. Think linearly. Find thoughts and understandings that complement each other that can give you truth to yourself and give you a deeper look into yourself. I'll have to link some resources that have helped me down below if I could remember them and find them. But you know what? I'll always remind you, always remind you that your standard of excellence does not exist below the fully exemplified vision for your brand. Your brand is meant to be seen, understood. It's meant to revolutionize industries. You're an industry disruptor. You're a creative innovator. That's your standard of excellence. So if you feel like you're being washed up, pushed aside by other brands, if you're constantly looking for other brands for validation to see if you should be doing the same thing, and if you've reached a point where you're just complacent with how things are going, you're not innovating, and you just know that this isn't where you're supposed to be, then I would really love for you to, one, subscribe, and two, download my free guide, the Spiritual Woman's Founder's Guide to Complete Brand Actualization. It's a guide I created to take you through the process of understanding your brands, the depths of its soul to the fullness of its heart, and the reality of where it is right now. So you can paint a picture and see it with your eyes. And it helps you remember the vision that God gave you, the original vision that you have, your divine inspired vision, and to fill the gaps in between the two. I would love for you to take a look at it and to get the most out of it. So link is in the description. Thank you for stopping by. And I'm hoping that this video resonated with you. I know it will. I know it's resonated because this is something that we all have to deal with, especially if you are a spiritual founder. There is a way to build successfully and have things successfully without working on yourself, but again, that's not our standard of excellence. It won't work long. I'll see you as soon as tomorrow.